This is Calin Georgescu, a far-right candidate in the recent elections in Romania. Georgescu, previously polling in single digits, went on to take the lead in the first round of voting in November. With the last round set for December 8th, he was one step away from becoming the president of Romania, an EU and NATO country. But before this could happen, the election was annulled by the courts. The meteoric rise of Georgescu didn't happen by chance. Analysts believe that a key factor in his unexpected success was a viral TikTok campaign that flooded Romanian social media with his speeches, nationalist rhetoric, and a sharp criticism of EU policies. But this wasn't just grassroots momentum. The campaign was suspiciously polished, well-funded, and perfectly timed. And as investigators began to dig deeper, a troubling question arose. Could Russia have been behind it? Georgescu's story is a snapshot of a much larger problem. It's not just about a single candidate or election. It's about how the West is losing control of the global narrative. To understand why, we need to look at how countries like Russia and China weaponize disinformation to divide us, and why our systems, rooted in freedom and openness, struggle to fight back. Propaganda today is no longer about obvious lies. It's about taking a little truth, wrapping it in manipulation, and using it to confuse and divide. Platforms like TikTok, Facebook, and Twitter, or X, have become prime real estate for this purpose. Russia and China exploit these tools to their advantage, turning the very freedoms we value into vulnerabilities. TikTok is a prime example. During the Hong Kong protests in 2019, millions of people took to the streets to oppose an extradition bill that would have allowed the Hong Kong government to send suspects to mainland China. The protests quickly grew into a broader pro-democracy movement, demanding greater freedoms and resisting Beijing's influence. On platforms like TikTok, many videos supporting the protesters mysteriously disappeared, replaced by content praising the Chinese government and promoting messages of stability and order. But not all their efforts are so clear-cut in their objectives. We like to think that we choose what we see online, but the truth is, what we see is often chosen for us by algorithms that decide which posts to rise to the top of our feeds. In principle, these algorithms are neutral. In practice, they reward sensationalism and controversy, anything that keeps us glued to our screens. Fear, anger, and outrage drive clicks, shares, and beliefs. Emotional content is amplified, creating echo chambers where people only see the views that reinforce their existing beliefs. In Western democracies, this often leads to the promotion of content that exacerbates moral decay. Extreme polarization, sensationalized news, and harmful trends gain traction. Meanwhile, in countries like Russia and China, these same platforms are tightly controlled. In China, for example, platforms like Douyin, the Chinese version of TikTok, prioritizes content that promotes educational achievement, national pride, and social harmony. This stark contrast shows how algorithms are weaponized differently. In the West, they deepen divisions, while in authoritarian states, they enforce stability and control. Russia and China didn't have to build these social media platforms, or develop the algorithms that make them so successful. We did this ourselves. All they have to do is take advantage of them. In 2013, Yevgeny Prigozhin, a close ally of Vladimir Putin at the time, founded the Internet Research Agency. This wasn't just another propaganda effort, it was a highly organized, state-backed organization to weaponize social media against democracies by leveraging the algorithms we have discussed. At its core, the Internet Research Agency functioned like a factory of disinformation. Operating out of St. Petersburg, it employed hundreds of workers split into shifts to ensure a 24/7 production line of content. These operatives managed a sprawling network of bot farms and troll accounts. The bot farms are automated, generating fake accounts to spam hashtags, flood comment sections, and amplify divisive posts. Trolls, on the other hand, were real people, tasked with creating and sharing tailored content to target specific audiences. These trolls would pose as activists, journalists, or concerned citizens, trying to infiltrate online conversations and manipulate public opinion. The IRA's primary strategy was to identify and exploit societal fault lines. They focused on issues guaranteed to provoke strong emotional reactions: race, immigration, gun rights, religions, and so on. Groups like Blacktivist, which pose as a grassroots social justice movement, turned out to be created by the IRA. On one side, accounts like this targeted Black Americans with posts highlighting racial injustice and discouraging voter turnout. On the other, they pushed content to conservative audiences, emphasizing fears of cultural erosion and societal decay. This dual approach deepened divides, ensuring that both sides viewed each other with suspicion and hostility. What made them so effective was their ability to blend in seamlessly. Their trolls were trained to use relevant language, memes, and references to make their posts seem more authentic. They would create viral posts or share stories tailored to the preferences of specific demographic groups, making it nearly impossible for the average user to distinguish real accounts from fake ones. This authenticity tricked users into amplifying the IRA's content, creating a snowball effect where real people were unknowingly spreading propaganda. The more they exploited the algorithms, the better they got at it. Eventually, fabricated stories about election fraud, violent protests, or immigrant crimes were engineered to go viral. The IRA's success wasn't limited to volume, but also coordination. Their campaigns spanned multiple platforms, including Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and even Reddit. By saturating every corner of the digital space, they ensured that their narratives reached a wide audience. It was their ability to react quickly to trends and shifts in public discourse that made them a formidable force. What's important to understand is that Russia and China operate on a fundamentally different timescale to the West. While Western democracies grapple with leadership changes every 5 to 10 years, authoritarian leaders like Putin and Xi enjoy decades of virtually unchallenged rule. This stability allows them to play the long game, a luxury the West can't afford. In a world where elections dictate the priorities of Western leaders and quick results are the goal, authoritarian regimes can execute strategies that unfold over decades, steadily advancing their global ambitions. For Russia, the goal is clear: weaken NATO and the EU, the alliance that stands in the way of re-establishing dominance over Eastern Europe. Their methods include spreading disinformation, supporting extremist movements, and amplifying societal divides. By sowing discord in Western democracies, they aim to undermine collective decision-making, eroding trust in institutions and weakening alliances that rely on unity. A fractured West is easier to manipulate and less capable of countering aggression. The war in Ukraine is a vivid example of how far Russia is willing to push these tactics, spreading propaganda portraying NATO as a threat to global peace. China's ambitions are even grander and more subtle. Through initiatives like the Belt and Road, they're not just exporting infrastructure, but also a model of state control and censorship. Coupled with digital campaigns that reshape global narratives, China positions itself as a stable, superior alternative to Western democracies. Their efforts extend beyond economic dominance. They're actively working to redefine what governance should look like. Through carefully crafted propaganda, they depict democracy as inherently chaotic and ineffective, a broken system that cannot provide stability or long-term growth. Meanwhile, China paints its authoritarian model as efficient, decisive, and forward-looking, appealing to nations disillusioned by Western instability. Both nations excel at exploiting the vulnerabilities of open societies. They don't need to create new problems. They amplify existing ones. Polarization, inequality, cultural conflicts, all until these issues seem insurmountable. By manipulating existing divides, they turn internal weakness into strategic advantage. The result? A paralyzed West, unable to act decisively or maintain unity, caught in an endless cycle of debate and division. What makes these strategies so insidious is their sophistication and patience. Real images are paired with fabricated stories, genuine frustrations twisted into divisive narratives, and societal tensions exacerbated in ways that seem organic but really are deeply calculated. It goes beyond spreading simple lies. It's about eroding the foundational trust that binds free societies, creating a reality where even the truth becomes a matter of perspective. It is a war on the collective ability to act together. The long game isn't just about destabilization today. It's about laying the groundwork for a future where the ideals of democracy are no longer seen as viable. The Canon Georgescu story is a great example of this. Romanians and many people in the West are deeply divided by the decisions to cancel the election. Many are claiming that the Russian interference claims were made up, that this is a coup, or that EU and or NATO are behind this. It will likely be years before we get enough evidence to support either side, if ever, but the damage has already been done. The West is once again divided and democracy is weakened. The West's greatest strength, freedom of speech, has become its Achilles heel. While authoritarian regimes like Russia and China tightly control their information ecosystems, the West hesitates, prioritizing open platforms despite clear evidence of exploitation. This approach has left our social media platforms vulnerable. But the problem runs deeper than platforms alone. Bureaucratic inefficiency and a reactive mindset compound the challenge. Unlike Putin and Xi, who can ban any platform on a whim with immediate effect, the West is burdened by the rule of law, committees, media criticism, and so on. Proceedings against TikTok in the US have been ongoing on and off since 2020. As of the making of this video, the Supreme Court has yet to hear the arguments against the ban. Even if the ban does stand, it's a lose-lose situation, as when the governments do take action against these threats, any legislation ends up being deeply unpopular with millions of citizens who will see it as an infringement on their rights, regardless of the reasons behind it. This will cause further distrust of the government, playing right into the hands of those who started the mess in the first place. This isn't to say that there's nobody doing anything about it in the West. There certainly have been attempts to innovate via social media platforms. New concepts like community notes on X.com, now also coming to Meta platforms, offer a new way to call out obvious misinformation. But community notes also have clear limitations. The system relies heavily on active, informed participation from a diverse user base. Without that, it risks being dominated by vocal, unrepresentative groups who may skew the narrative or even use the platform to spread more misinformation. Fact-checking campaigns and media literacy programs, while well-intentioned, are too slow to counter the speed of viral disinformation. Governments, mired in debates over ethics and privacy, move at a glacial pace compared to authoritarian states that act swiftly and decisively. Ultimately, the challenge for the West is balancing free expression with accountability. Democracy's survival will depend on its ability to innovate rapidly without sacrificing the principles that define it. After all, there is no point in protecting democracy if we lose the freedoms that define what democracy is.